Amara Wilson stood on the station platform, her heart sinking as she faced Harold Pierce, the man she had traveled across the country to meet. The delicate hat she had bought for this moment now felt like a ridiculous detail amid the humiliation. 3 weeks of travel, 6 months of passionate letters, and a trunk full of hopes had all crumbled in seconds. Harold's face turned pale, as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. "This isn't going to work," he stammered, taking a step back. "You didn't mention that you were black." Amara finished the sentence for him, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "You didn't ask." She could see the nervous glances of passengers and station employees, their curiosity piqued by the spectacle of a well-dressed black woman being publicly rejected by a white man. "You have to understand my position," Harold muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "The community here, my business." He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out some crumpled bills. "I can pay for your ticket back. You seem educated. I'm sure you'll understand." A chill ran down Amara's spine, not from sadness but from a controlled anger that simmered beneath the surface. In his letters, Harold had written about the lonely heart of a 45-year-old widower who longed for companionship and understanding. At no point did he mention that this heart had a color preference. "I spent all my savings to get here," she said, her voice unwavering. "I have nowhere to go back to." Just then, a deep voice cut through the tense air like thunder on a clear day. "Is that your solution, Pierce? Throw money at the problem and hope it goes away like it always does." A tall man appeared behind Harold, his piercing eyes fixed on the merchant, who now seemed to shrink in size. He was dressed in simple but visibly expensive clothes, the kind of simplicity that only the truly wealthy can afford to display. His suntanned face betrayed a life spent outdoors, but his posture exuded unquestionable authority. "This is none of your concern," Harold replied, but his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "It becomes my concern when I watch a man I've known for 15 years behave like a coward." The man turned to Amara, his gaze softening slightly. "Miss, allow me to introduce myself. Alexander Maxwell. I have a property just outside the city." Amara nodded stiffly, suspicious. From experience, she knew that kindness from strangers often came with a hidden price. "If I may be so bold," Alexander continued, "I offer you lodging at my home until you decide your next course of action. We have guest rooms that are rarely used, and my housekeeper would be delighted to have company." Harold visibly choked on the offer. "Maxwell, you can't be serious. What will people say?" Alexander smiled a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The same people who do business with me every day. The same people who depend on my land for their livelihood. I'm curious to hear what they would say." Harold paled even more, understanding the implied message. Alexander Maxwell wasn't just a farmer. He was the owner of half the productive land in the region. What no one at that station could guess was that while Amara wavered between wounded pride and practical necessity, she carried with her not only a trunk of clothes, but also a secret that would forever change the balance of power in that small community. A secret that would make Harold Pierce bitterly regret the day he decided that skin color determined a person's worth. The Maxwell estate was not just a farm on the outskirts, as its owner had modestly described it. It was a stately Victorian mansion surrounded by acres of thriving plantations and lush pastures where thoroughbred horses grazed peacefully. As Alexander's carriage passed through the ornate gates, Amara felt simultaneously impressed and suspicious. "People here aren't used to differences," Alexander explained as he pointed to the main house. Riverbrook was founded by traditional families who remain conveniently stuck in the past. Harold Pierce is just a symptom of a deeper disease. The housekeeper, Mrs. Foster, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a stiff posture, greeted Amara with professional courtesy. If she was surprised by the presence of a black guest, she didn't show it. "I've prepared the blue room, the one with the best view of the garden," she said, leading Amara through hallways decorated with priceless paintings and antiques. At dinner that evening, Served in the imposing dining room, Alexander explained his history. He was the son of a banker from the North and a teacher who had embraced abolitionist causes. He had inherited not only a fortune but also strict principles about equality. When he moved to Riverbrook 15 years earlier, he had been regarded as eccentric, too rich to be ostracized but too different to be completely accepted. "And what is your story, Miss Wilson?" he finally asked after describing the businesses he ran. "Your letters must have impressed Harold for him to extend such a formal invitation." Amara hesitated, but something about Alexander's direct manner inspired confidence. "I'm a teacher. I was a teacher in Boston. I taught literature and history at a school for girls of color. When the school closed due to lack of funds, I realized I needed to start over somewhere else." What Amara didn't mention was the real reason behind her letters: the unexpected inheritance from her grandfather, a man who had spent his entire life as a butler for a wealthy family. This inheritance included not only carefully saved gold coins, but also ancient documents that could change the fate of certain lands in the Riverbrook region, documents she had hidden in a false bottom of her trunk. In the days that followed, Alexander gave Amara something rare: space to think. The mansion's library was a treasure trove of knowledge, and she immersed herself in books on local history, geography, and the laws of the region. When asked about her interests, she would simply smile and say she was broadening her horizons. A week after her arrival, news of her presence had spread throughout the small town. Visits to the Maxwell mansion suddenly increased. Curious neighbors, merchants' wives, even the local reverend, all suddenly remembering urgent matters to discuss with Alexander. "Just look at that," Alexander muttered during afternoon tea after a particularly obvious delegation had left. "You've become the local attraction without even setting foot in town." Amara smiled bitterly. "I've always been an attraction, Mr. Maxwell. The difference is that now I have a porcelain teacup in my hand while I'm being watched." It was during one of these visits that Harold Pierce finally worked up the courage to show up. He arrived unannounced, hat in hand, his face a mask of false concern. "Maxwell," he greeted nervously, "I just came to see if Miss Wilson is comfortable." "Absolutely delighted," Alexander replied dryly. "Why don't you ask her personally?" Harold's face paled as Amara entered the room, wearing one of the elegant dresses Mrs. Foster had altered for her. No longer the exhausted, humiliated woman from the station, she moved with confidence and purpose. "Mr. Pierce," she greeted him coldly. "What an unexpected surprise." "Miss Wilson," Harold stammered, fiddling with his hat. "I came to see how you're doing. The community is concerned about your well-being." "How kind of them," Amara replied, her tone icy. "But I'm afraid my plans have changed. I intend to remain in Riverbrook indefinitely." Harold's eyes widened. "That's impossible. You don't know anyone here. You have no job, no family." "I have a job," Amara replied calmly. "Mr. Maxwell has kindly offered me the position of librarian on his estate. Apparently, generations of Maxwells have accumulated books without ever organizing them properly." Harold looked at Alexander with a mixture of shock and barely contained anger. "You can't be serious." Alexander shrugged. "I've never been more serious. Miss Wilson is educated and competent. My library has never been in better hands." What Harold didn't realize as he stumbled through increasingly feeble protests was the true significance of that job. The Maxwell Library didn't just contain classics of literature. It also housed land records, legal documents, and the complete history of the region, including details that many traditional families would prefer to keep buried. When Harold finally left, defeated and furious, Alexander watched from the window as he hurried across the garden. "He'll try to make your life difficult," he remarked. "The little humiliation you inflicted on his ego today will not be forgotten." Amara nodded, a new determination shining in her eyes. "Let him try. While he's busy spreading petty rumors, I'll be digging much deeper than he ever imagined." What Harold Pierce couldn't know What no one in Riverbrook could guess was that the hours Amara spent in the library had a very specific purpose. Amid yellow documents and dusty records, she was beginning to piece together a puzzle that would reveal an uncomfortable truth. Riverbrook's traditional founding families, including the Pierces, had built their fortunes on land that did not rightfully belong to them. 2 weeks later, the small hall of Riverbrook's town hall was overflowing. An emergency call had brought together the founding families, local merchants, and farmers from across the region. At the center of the commotion, Harold Pierce gestured wildly, his face red with indignation. "It's an outrage! Maxwell is openly defying our traditions by keeping that woman on his property. Decent families are concerned about rumors of inappropriate behavior." As murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, the doors swung open. Alexander Maxwell entered calmly, followed by Amara Wilson, who walked with the dignity of a queen. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "I appreciate the invitation," Alexander said, his voice firm, reaching every corner of the hall. "Although I must correct a misunderstanding, Miss Wilson is not here as my guest, but as the legal representative of a matter that deeply concerns all of you." Harold laughed nervously. "Legal representative? A woman of color with no education or authority? Maxwell, have you completely lost your mind?" Amara opened her briefcase methodically. "Actually, Mr. Pierce, in addition to being a certified teacher, I have legal power of attorney as a direct descendant of Joseph Freeman." The name struck like lightning in the silent hall. The older faces paled visibly. "Joseph Freeman doesn't exist," Harold retorted quickly. "Curious," Amara replied, removing yellow documents from her briefcase. "Because I have here the original deed signed by the governor in 1866, granting Joseph Freeman, my great-grandfather, a man freed after the Civil War, the land that today constitutes approximately 60% of Riverbrook, including your store, Mr. Pierce." Judge Thornton adjusted his glasses to examine the documents Amara now presented. This looks authentic." "It's a forgery," Harold shouted, but his voice trembled. "The supporting records are here," Amara continued unperturbed, "including the account of how Joseph Freeman was forced to flee after attempted lynchings in 1870 and how the founding families divided his land among themselves, forming what they called the Riverbrook Property Committee." Alexander then spoke. "The Maxwell Library keeps copies of all land records in the region. Curious how the specific 1870 to 1872 session was missing until Miss Wilson found cross-references in other documents." Reverend Miller, an elderly man, bowed his head. "My father mentioned that story. He said it was a sin buried deep." "We're not here to punish the descendants for the sins of their ancestors," Amara declared. "I'm proposing a deal, the creation of a community foundation that benefits all citizens of Riverbrook, especially for education and affordable housing." Harold Pierce laughed nervously. "That's absurd. No one will believe this charade." That was when Attorney Jeff, a respected three-state lawyer, entered the hall. "The documents have been verified by the State Historical Records Commission. They are authentic, and I am pleased to inform you that the lawsuit has been formally filed." The hall erupted in raised voices. Amid the confusion,